Alright, what's good y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So before we get started here, a couple of things I'd like to say. And don't worry, I'll make sure to put a timestamp somewhere. But for those of you who have been around, you can probably see that lately I've been experimenting with the channel a little bit. I've essentially started up Soul Shorts, a series of shorts in which I just kind of do what I do here, but, short. However, another thing that I've decided to do literally right before recording this is to open up Shorts responses. In one of my recent videos, I did literally just tell you guys that I wanted to do more response videos, and don't worry, the traditional style is not going anywhere. However, this way, you guys can ask me whatever you want and I can respond to it in a short style video. Sorry, you guys already very well knew that the plugs were coming. There are three different ways that you guys can get your comments responded to. Of course, commenting here is very nice, helps out the video a ton, and I really do appreciate that every time you guys do it. However, for organizational purposes, joining the Discord is definitely one of the easiest ways for me to respond to your comments or your questions. I have a little video ideas tab that is perfect for this very situation, so make sure that you put your questions or comments there and I'll find a way to respond to them or make videos out of them. We'll play it by ear. And the other option, and I say option because technically it's basically the same thing, but Twitter and or Blue.Sky. Just write out a comment or question and then hit me with an @ of something you would like me to respond to. And it's as simple as that. All of the links to everything that I just mentioned are in the description, so make sure to join the Discord, follow me on Blue.Sky and or Twitter, and we can, have a real open line of communication here. And like I said, I will still be doing the traditional response videos, so make sure that you're, following on one of those platforms so that when I ask a question, you're ready to respond and we could do a regular video. Okay, sorry, had to get that out of the way. So it's obviously no mystery what we're going to be talking about here today. You have seen the title and witnessed the thumbnail. We have talked time and time again very passively about how Pokemon is not really difficult at all. Hell, I made a recent video talking about ways that Pokemon could actually appeal to both younger and older audiences. In that video and multiple times before it, I have talked consistently about the frustration of how Pokemon treats every single one of its players like incapable children. Especially more so in modern titles, it's very frustrating to be handheld through every little scenario that gets presented to us within these games. You can go ahead and call me an old head if you want after I say this right now, and that would be totally justified, but it's very clear to me and plenty of others that challenges and puzzles are not what they used to be when it comes to Pokemon. The gym challenges and quote-unquote puzzles that we have today can't even hold a candle to the cave systems that we had back in the day. Now, here's my thing, and this is probably gonna sound kind of insane considering that I just went on a rant about this a minute ago. But I can, for sure, live without insane, egregious puzzles from gym challenges or from overworld stuff. Fine, we don't always need to have that kind of thing. My real issue is that now it completely imbalances these games and makes them too easy because the standard RPG aspect of the game is simply too easy. Like, how are you gonna sit there and take away any semblance of challenge and puzzles that we had from previous games and not compensate for that in any way, shape, and form? Surely there has to be some form of solution for this, right? And that, my friends, is where I finally put in my proposition. And so I present to you a question. What if modern Pokemon games had difficulty options? It seems that we have today's prompt in order, so you guys already know the drill. Go ahead, kick back, grab a snack, maybe a nice hearty meal. Go ahead and grab that chocolate syrup and pour that all in your ramen and mix that all up while we talk about if modern Pokemon could utilize a difficulty option. I essentially have two questions. Firstly, do we need difficulty options? In this situation, need is definitely a very strong word, but at the very least, I could consider the possibility of necessity. With the most recent entry of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it has very much been proven to me that we are moving into a very different era of Pokemon. Sure, we do have an open world format now, but that means that progression, because this game is meant for a younger audience, is probably going to be a lot more straightforward from this point on. And you don't just have to take my word for it, all you have to do is look at Generation 8, Pokemon Legends, as well as Generation 9. Difficulty? Non-existent, and you're not convincing me of anything otherwise. And of course, when I say this, this absolutely heavily applies to the RPG aspects as well. There was a point in time where it took a lot more trial and error to really understand how Pokemon type matchups worked. Sure, maybe sometimes in earlier games they would kind of give you hints here and there as to how type matchups worked, but, at the very least they would still, test you on that. One of the important aspects of having a rival pick a type matchup that was stronger than yours was so that you would learn off rip, oh, okay, this is actually not a good matchup for me. I need to find Pokemon that can rival this. And would you look at that? All of us turned out perfectly fine playing Generation 1 by learning that way. So naturally, it comes to no mystery as to why everybody has been so upset with how rivals have worked within the last decade. This may be a very dramatic take, but if we're being so completely real, you learn better by losing. You get better at a skill or a fact is more hammered into you when you get something wrong. That way, you learn better so you try not to get it wrong again. The thing about modern Pokemon is that sometimes they make it kinda hard to get things wrong. And that, right there, is where the problem lies. Anybody that's grown up with this series can attest to the fact that we know this series just a little too well by now. We're so well adjusted to the basics now that it's kind of a problem that we pretty much never feel like we go past the basics throughout these games. We know the games well enough to a point where they've simply become relatively mindless to play. Which is totally fine. People consider Pokemon a cozy game for a good reason. However though, and I'm definitely going to be reaching a little bit out of Pokemon again, so bear with me here. As a fan of plenty of other RPGs, whether it be Earthbound, whether it be Dragon Quest, and naturally of course, Persona, I think that it's safe to say for me and quite a few others that it can be nice to have the option to play the game as a cozy game, but it is also nice to have the option for some genuine challenge sometimes. What I've always liked about Persona is that it constantly has you thinking. It constantly has you considering and weighing every single option during every single battle. It makes you consider how you're utilizing your resources. Most of the time, it genuinely has you considering who's gonna be on your team for that run of the dungeon. Consistently, you are going in and out of all of these dungeons considering what items that you need to have on your character, all of your party members, what weapons they have, if they have the proper upgrades equipped, if they have the right movesets. Now, of course, to a regular schmegular everyday casual Pokemon fan, that probably sounds kind of overwhelming, a little unnecessary. But to somebody like me and you, people who have grown up with this series, people who have seen consistent potential for this series to grow in such an incredible way, to not see it progress in a way like this is a little frustrating sometimes, isn't it? At this point, when it comes to Pokemon veterans, the most challenge we get outside of like raid battles and things like that is the random occasional difficulty spike that we get during random gym challenges or the occasional post game whenever they decide to give us somebody actually threatening like Volo for whatever reason. But that's kind of just it, right? Especially at this point in time where we've kind of come to expect it, 9 times out of 10, the difficulty is just them raising the level a little bit higher than we expected sometimes. And it's like, guys, you can't be this afraid to kick our asses sometimes. It is okay to do that sometimes. Which is the exact reason why I bring up games like Persona and Dragon Quest or even Xenoblade. All of these games, RPGs, have difficulty options. Because it is simply nice to have the option. Do I want to go into this game and play it as something cozy just so I can enjoy the story, or do I want to fight for my life and earn my ending and feel really accomplished afterwards? And trust me, I completely understand. Some of you may think that I am completely mental for even considering wanting something like that. But hey, you know what? Everybody enjoys games very differently, and that is completely okay. There is nothing wrong with that. Enjoy the game however you want to enjoy it. So, all of that being said, we go back to my earlier question. Yes, I do believe that we need difficulty options. If there's at the very least one very small, insignificant way that we could absolutely appeal to younger and older audiences, it is by implementing that. Simply that. And I feel like we will be much better for it. And so we move on to my second question. What does adding a hard mode even entail in this scenario? Well, there's definitely a million different ways that we could do this, but for the sake of this video and keeping a reasonable time on it, I've grabbed a handful. So, let's say in this scenario, you're starting up a brand new Pokemon game, you have the difficulty options presented in front of you, and you pick hard. What does that mean for you? Well, for starters, that means you probably will not get the ability to level up your entire party at once. Since the experience share issue is easily everybody's biggest problem with these games, why don't we go ahead and fix that with a harder difficulty? On easy or normal, you could have the standard situation where you go into battle with whatever Pokemon you want up front, and your entire party gets all of the experience earned based on that battle. Cool, awesome, great, phenomenal. However, on a harder difficulty, this means that you need to be paying a lot more attention to the Pokemon that you're using up front, which means that taking away the experience share option makes you actively utilize your entire party. One of the reasons why losing this was such a critical hit when it came to Pokemon is because it took away a lot of the strategy aspect when it came to team building. Sure, in our younger days, there were times where we would just grab one Pokemon and fly through the game with our starter, not even thinking about any of the other Pokemon that we caught. Fine, whatever, that's a situation in of itself that we'll get to later. However, growing up and doing randomized Nuzlockes for myself have really made me appreciate a lot more Pokemon, a lot more than I ever would have. Actively forcing me to utilize all of the Pokemon on my team gets me to learn their strengths and weaknesses. And learning those strengths and weaknesses allows me to figure out how to best utilize them for my current team. What areas and weaknesses can this Pokemon cover for that the rest of my team can't? And this is the kind of thing that allowed for me to appreciate Pokemon a lot more. One thing that a lot of people don't really tend to appreciate much when it comes to Pokemon is the love and care put into each individual Pokemon. Obviously, of course, some Pokemon get more love than others, but that's neither here nor there. Not every Pokemon is equal. Let's be so honest. But the only way for us to learn something like that is to actively utilize these Pokemon to figure out what they're like. This sole fact is one of the reasons why I believe that regional forms is such a good idea. Through learning about each individual Pokemon, I've learned about a lot of Pokemon that are just generally not good and would love a chance for them to get another shot in the limelight through regional forms. All of this to say, it's easy to mindlessly just level up your entire party and not have to think about all of the holes that are within it, as opposed to actively having to strategically build your team. To learn every single nook and cranny about all of the Pokemon that you're utilizing right now, because that's harder. That's work, and that makes the game just a little bit more interesting. Now, this next one that I'm going to mention here is something that I could personally probably go without, but this is completely dependent on how you feel about it. But I'm just going to throw it in there. Maybe some damage modifiers. Under the assumption that I'm using this term correctly, that means that obviously on harder difficulties, enemies just generally deal more damage. Again, if they were to add a harder difficulty, I could go with or without this. However, that would definitely make you a little more scared, and again, would probably add on to my previous point. I fully believe with everything that I have that them dealing more damage would definitely incentivize you to prep your team up a lot better to take hits. And then you're leaning into more traditional RPG territory. Yeah, you gotta have your hard hitters, your general attackers, but you also gotta have your tanks, the ones that are taking most of the hits, you know? The primary reason that I bring this up but don't really seem too invested in the idea is because it's something that I've seen in Xenoblade, and it's not that it makes the game unbearable or anything like that, but it can make the game a little more frustrating when it just generally just seems like a little much, you know what I mean? But then again, I don't know, it seems a little more fair in other games too, like Persona, and you know, not that it's not fair in Xenoblade, but regardless, I feel like that's definitely something I could go either way on. If they have it, fine, cool, I'll definitely find a way to work around it. If they don't have it, okay, whatever, I will strategically build my team the same way I always have. That's something I'm sure we will talk about in the comment section, so let's go ahead and move on. Now, I bring this one up solely because it's just such a simple change that I feel like they could even do this now, just in general, after a while or whatever, but just removing how obvious it is whether or not a move or a typing is super effective against something else. This was not something that we had in generations 1 through 5, where once you have a Pokemon logged into your Pokédex, you have every ounce of information on that Pokemon, which means that when you go into battle, you can see what moves are effective or not effective on that Pokemon. And you know, of course, on one hand, I'm thinking, okay, well, that's fair. I went out of my way to catch that Pokemon so that I could learn about it. So now I have that advantage in which I know what this Pokemon is weak to, so that when I fight it, I can deal with it much easier. But then I think back to the original couple of generations of Pokemon and remember, I got by without this mechanic perfectly fine. Not having that mechanic is what instilled type matchups for me so well that I know type matchups by heart. So again, refer to me as an old head. I don't really care. I feel like newer players could benefit from that. I will always be more invested in something that I have to learn for myself as opposed to something that is simply handed to me. If it's being read for me, it's not getting as instilled as me going out of my way to learn it for myself. For example, let's say you're watching a show or enjoying a book of some kind. And for the sake of conversation here, let's say it's some sort of fantasy media that has some form of intricate magic system. Now, on one hand, the story may somehow be explaining the magic system to you consistently. They're always telling you exactly how everything works. Now, of course, that could be considered very good writing. If they're telling you every single detail about the magic system, you can figure, oh, okay, well, this is how they'll deal with this situation when it arises. And that's cool, that's neat, and that's dandy. But what if they were just a little bit more cryptic about it? Now it's got a little bit of a mysterious air to it. Now it's not as completely obvious how these characters are going to deal with every single situation that arises. And maybe, just maybe, in that situation, you get a little bit more interested because you don't know what's coming. You don't know how it's going to get handled, but you want to try and see what the outcome is anyway. Okay, this is for sure not my strongest analogy, but I feel like you guys are getting the picture here, right? Long story short, if you're interested enough to try and figure it out, that means the more interested you are in playing the game. Which is why I do feel like that little tiny insignificant change could make a world of difference for a lot of players. Especially if y'all decide to throw in a new typing in the next couple of years, because I know that Fairy is not going to be the last new typing. I think that's going to be a nice little refresh for a lot of us if y'all throw in a new typing, but we don't have the mechanic that tells us exactly what it's weak to, you know what I mean? Now moving on to my last one here, and this is probably a lot more obvious than pretty much any of the prior ones, is simply stronger opponents, or if we want to get more technical about it, then more intelligent AI. One of the things that was very strange but I kind of appreciated about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is the insane difficulty spike by the time that you got to the Elite Four. By the time that you get to the Elite Four, they are using strategies that people would utilize online. Maybe they weren't the best at it, of course, because they couldn't be that insanely hard, but it was definitely a massive change from what we've been used to up to that point. However, I feel like that could be utilized a little more strategically and planted throughout the game as opposed to just the ass end of it. Give us some more challenging trainers that utilize their own unique setups that are built around maybe one or two Pokemon on their team. If we are going into a lot of these gyms knowing exactly what typing we're going to be going up against, you could at the very least give some of the trainers as well as the gym leader a very specific strategy so that they can counter what we're utilizing to counter them. And now look at what we have on our hands, a situation where we have to think even more. Oh man, they're using this specific item to, heal themselves or power themselves up a little more. How can I counteract that? No, of course, this isn't something that we haven't seen before. We have seen plenty of instances where very specific trainers, gym leaders, and just general AI throughout Pokemon in some cases have utilized very specific strategies. But I just feel like it's one of those things that isn't utilized often enough. Do you follow? Especially amongst gym leaders, Elite Four, and champions. We don't see that kind of thing often enough whatsoever. Which is precisely why I feel like this would be a much nicer change of pace as opposed to what we have now, which is 9 to 90% of the trainers essentially just going after our weaknesses. I feel like we could do more than that. Oh, Shinx, and last one before I forget, level scaling. I feel like most of us can agree that one of the weirdest aspects of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was that there was no level scaling regardless of the fact that you could technically go wherever you wanted to fight first. And even then, I say that very loosely because it was very obvious that they had a structured path for us. At the very least, one of the things we could do is just have it so that these trainers level scale. I don't think that's that crazy. And that's, I don't even think I need to go into explanation for that, do I? I feel like that's really straightforward. All in all, I definitely love Pokemon a lot, and I just would love to see them actually challenge us a little bit, because again, not all of us are children that are incapable of playing these games ourselves, and just because you make the game just a little bit on the challenging side does not mean that we're gonna give up at the first sign of inconvenience. Let us grow, let us learn, let us strategize, let us build our teams the way that we want to build our teams, because there is absolutely nothing stronger than a bond between you and your Pokemon that you have personally built up yourself, as opposed to all of them just sitting in the back gaining every ounce of experience that is completely unearned. Of course, Pokemon isn't the only game with this problem. A lot of other games have this problem, but in Pokemon it just seems so much more prominent for some reason. Regardless though, I don't think that I'm all that crazy being an older Pokemon fan and asking for a little bit more challenge, but hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. Whew. So that just about wraps it up for this one. I'm very surprised that we have never truly had like a dedicated video to this specific topic, and if we have, I'm sorry, I don't remember when we did it. I didn't look at any of my past videos, so if there is another one specifically very much similar to this video here, I'm very sorry. But hey, you know what? We've run into a lot of new faces and, you know, consistent watchers since then, so I feel like if there was ever a time to talk about it again, why not now? Because clearly it's been long enough to the point where I don't even remember talking about this. But regardless, I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree with everything that I said here? Do you agree that Pokemon could use a little bit more in the challenge department, and that they shouldn't be afraid to challenge us a little bit and not be too afraid that we'll quit as soon as things get a little bit harder? Or do you think that I'm absolutely insane? Pokemon is meant to be a little more on the cozy side, and the only reason that it's easy is because I know the series a little too well, and that's my own fault. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, yeah, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and do just that. I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.